Hi, this is Sean Corson, Chief Analytics Officer and co-founder with Daasity. Today I'm going to be talking about cost per order and cost of acquisition marketing metrics, the differences between the two, and some gotchas that might come up when measuring the two. Cost per order and cost of acquisition are two of the three commonly used marketing efficiency metrics in the e-commerce world, the third being return on ad spend, or ROAS. Cost per order and cost of acquisition are very similar. The only difference between the two is the denominator that's used in the calculation. Let's take a look at that calculation. What I've laid out here are the marketing metrics for a single company. What you have in column C and column D are essentially the same numbers for a single company. Let's say that this is XYZ Co, and these are the metrics that they have for the last month. So the cost per order calculation, you can see here in rows 4 through 8. So they spent $1,000 in marketing spend for the month. They received 100 new orders. 50 of those orders were from new customers, so they have a 50% new customer. The cost per order calculation is simply spend divided by orders. So they have a $10 CPA. Cost of acquisition, on the other hand, is spend divided by new customers. So they have a $20 cost of acquisition. And here you can just see this laid out version, so you can see it all. Now, when looking at cost per order and cost of acquisition, typically a company will use these to compare efficiencies between two different marketing channels or multiple different marketing channels. So let's look at the same example for XYZ Co. This is the exact same numbers, but we've now split them out between the two channels that they advertised in last month, Facebook and Google. So $500 in marketing spend in Facebook, $500 in marketing spend in Google. In Facebook, we received 25 orders, and in Google, we received 75 orders. So just looking at cost per order, obviously, Google has a much more efficient cost per order, right? In Facebook, it was $20. We spent $20 for every order we received. And in Google, we spent $6.67 for every order we received. So if you're only looking at cost per order, this might cause you to make some bad decisions here, right? Perhaps you say, well, let's move marketing spend out of Facebook and into Google because it's much more efficient. However, in this example, Facebook has an extreme new customer rate here, right? So 100% of those orders were coming from new customers. Versus Google, we only had 25 of those 75 orders came from new customers. So now when you look at cost of acquisition, you can see they're the same. We have a $20 cost of acquisition for each channel. And that's very important. So gotcha number one, you have to look at both of these metrics. You can't make decisions only looking at cost per order or only looking at cost of acquisition. Number two, cost of acquisition, it's not a more important metric per se, but depending on your brand and where it is in its growth cycle, it may be a metric that you want to focus on a little more. So if you are spending a lot of money in acquisition and still trying to determine where exactly your new customers are going to come from, looking at cost per acquisition and using that as a guide for where you should be putting your money is probably a better way to go. Finally, one last gotcha here. In the UI for different vendors like Facebook or Google, they will often put a number that they label as cost of acquisition, either CPA or CAC. Note that that number is almost never actually a cost of acquisition. So Facebook and Google don't necessarily know that a customer is a new customer. They might know if that customer has ever come through Facebook or Google before, but perhaps that customer purchased for the first time on your brand, but they came directly typing in the URL. Facebook and Google don't have access to that data necessarily. So what Facebook and Google are usually showing you is just a cost per order. It is not a cost of acquisition. So do not take their numbers as a cost of acquisition number. They don't have all of the data they need to know whether it was a new customer or not. To really have that set of data, you need someone like you need a vendor, a third-party vendor like Daasity, who can piece together data from Shopify and potentially from other sources, and tell you, yes, this is actually a new customer that you acquired here, and so your cost of acquisition is X.